Hello and welcome one and all to yet another video of Expressophilia. Today we'll be learning the second chapter of Maharashtra State Board's Standard 12 on saying please by A.G. Gardner.
This is part 2 of the same video. So let's start.
In the previous part of On Saying Please, we learned that good manners add value to human life. They make our days pleasant as well as people whom we come in contact with. Words of courtesies such as thank you and please win our friends and make the passage of our life smooth. Though good manners are an asset to one's life, there are no penalties or legal consequences for bad manners either. It is a very vulgar mind that would wish to command where we have the service of asking, and have it with willingness and good feeling instead of resentment. I would like to feature in this connection, my friend, the polite conductor. By this discriminating title, I do not intend to suggest a rebuke to conductors generally. On the contrary, I am disposed to think that there are few classes of men who come through the ordeal of a very trying calling better than bus conductors do. Here and there, you'll meet an unpleasant specimen who regards the passengers as their natural enemies, as creatures whose chief purpose on the bus is to cheat him, and who can only be kept reasonably honest by a loud voice and an aggressive manner. But this type is rarer than it used to be. The writer here is emphasizing the heart which is expecting services by being rude or mannerless or being direct in asking. If this kind of a heart is served by a person without being bitter or share the same kind of a feeling, which is incorrect. The writer is also giving an example of a very polite bus conductor. And by giving the example of a bus conductor, he is not trying to discriminate, but rather he is not even generalizing the bus conductors. On the contrary, he is stating that the bus conductors belong to the fraternity that work hard to sustain their jobs. But at times, one comes across a bus conductor who thinks passengers are their inborn enemy and they are the creators of all their problems and they are born to thug them. The bus conductor feels that the passenger can be kept reasonably honest in an aggressive manner. But this type is rarer than it used to be. I fancy the public owes much to the Underground Railway Company, which also runs the buses, for insisting on a certain standard of civilities in its servants and taking care that the standard is observed. In doing this, it not only makes things pleasant for the travelling public, but performs an important social service. It is not, therefore, with any feeling of unfriendliness to conductors as a class that I pay a tribute to a particular member of that class. I first became conscious of his existence one day when I jumped onto a bus and found that I had left home without any money in my pocket. Everyone has had the experience and knows the feeling, the mixed feeling which the discovery arouses. You are annoyed because you look like a fool at the best and like a knave at the worst. It shows that the writer must also have travelled in buses. The writer says the public should be thankful to the Underground Railway Company who runs the services of the Underground Railways and the buses both, as this company emphasizes that the people working in these companies should have a level of courtesy and standard, so that the company provides good service to the people and their employees. By doing so, they are not only providing good service or social service, but also being polite with the people. The writer, coming back to his bus conductor's example, writes that is the day when he came to know who he was, when he had entered the bus without any money in his pocket. Someday, everyone must have come across such a feeling. It's a mixed feeling after we come to know that we have no money. You are angry, annoyed, as you look like a fool or a naive person, as you have forgotten your purse at home, or you
look like a cheater who does not want to pay for the bus fare.
You would not at all be surprised if the conductor eyed you coldly as much as to say, "Yes, I know the stale old trick. Now then, off you get." And even if the conductor is a good fellow and lets you down easily, you are faced with the necessity of going back and the inconvenience, perhaps, of missing your train or your engagement. Having searched my pocket in vain for a stray coppers and having found I am utterly penniless, I told the conductor with as honest a face as I could assume that I couldn't pay the fare and must go back for money. "Oh, you need not get off." "That's all right," said I. "All right," said I. "But I haven't a copper on me." "Oh, I'll book you through," he replied. "Where did you want to go?" And he handled his bundle of tickets with the air of a man who was prepared to give me a ticket for anywhere from the bank to Hong Kong.
You won't be surprised if the bus conductor gave you that look that, he has caught you with the age-old trick of falsely acting that you are without the purse. Or rather, he would just feel that you have come to cheat him. But even after considering that the bus conductor is a good fellow and he would let you get down, there is an inconvenience, or perhaps you are probably missing a train or an important meeting. Further, the writer adds that he endlessly searched for his pocket, but alas, he was without any money. He told the same with a very honest face to the conductor, and to his surprise and amusement, the conductor did not ask him to get down, but rather he asked him where would he want to go, as if the conductor was ready to bank the ticket to him from the bank to Hong Kong, anywhere. I said it was very kind of him and told him where I wanted to go. And as he gave me the ticket, I said, "But where shall I send the fare?" "Oh, you'll see me someday, all right," he said cheerfully as he turned to go. And then, luckily, my fingers, still wandering in the corners of my pocket, lightened on a shilling and the account was squared. But that fact did not lessen the glow of pleasure which so good-natured an action has given me. A few days after, my most sensitive toe was trampled on rather heavily as I sat reading on the top of a bus. I looked up with some anger and more agony, and saw my friend on the cheerful continency. "Sorry, sir," he said. "I know these are heavy boots." Now here, the writer finds the bus conductor to be very kind, and he questions the bus conductor where would he find him so that he could pay off his fare. However, smilingly, the bus conductor says that someday he would find him. However, trying to return back, while the writer is still finding for some money in his pocket, and he is able to locate 1 shilling, which is equal to £1, and after that he pays off the conductor. This act of kindness was so large enough that it would not leave the writer's mind in spite of he paying off for this ticket price. A few days later, he was again travelling in a bus with a very sensitive toe, and by chance somebody happened to hit his sensitive toe. He looked up with anger and agony, and he saw the same cheerful friend. That was the conductor. He stated, "Sorry, sir, I know these are heavy boots. Got them because my own feet got trod on so much, and now I am treading on other people's. I hope I didn't hurt you, sir." He had hurt me, but he was so nice about it that I assured him he hadn't. After this, I began to observe him whenever I boarded his bus, and found a curious pleasure in the constant good nature of his bearing. He seemed to have an inexhaustible fund of patience and a gift for making his passengers comfortable. I noticed that if it was raining, he would run up to the stairs to give someone the tip that there was room inside. With old people, he was as considerate as a son, and with children, as solicitous as a father.
He had evidently a peculiar warm place in his heart for young people and always indulged in some merry jest with them. If he had a blind man on board, it wasn't enough to set him down safely on the pavement.
As we see here that the cheerful conductor was quick to apologize, saying that he had got those heavy boots on because his toes were often squashed by other people, and yet ironically he himself was now stepping on people's toes. When he asked Gardner if he were hurt, the latter reassured him that he was not, even though it is point of fact that he was. What is illustrated here is the effect of politeness and how good behavior evinces good behavior. From the incident onwards, or rather from that incident onwards, the author begins to make a note of the polite conductor and his actions. He seems to have a limitless supply of patience and goodwill towards his passengers, as caring as a son to the elder brother, as a father to the children. He also goes out of his way to make a passenger comfortable. By letting people know that there is a seat downstairs, or by cracking jokes with young people to make them laugh, or to set down a blind man up on the footpath and safe on his way. The polite conductor always executes good temper and kindness. That Gardner says that a journey with him taught one what natural courtesy and good manners were.
He would call to Bill in front to wait while he took him across the road or round the corner or otherwise safely on his way. In short, I found that he eradicated such an atmosphere of good temper and kindliness that a journey with him was a lesson in natural courtesy and good manners. What struck me particularly was the ease with which he got through his work. If bad manners are infectious, so also are good manners. If we encounter incivility, most of us are apt to become uncivil. But it is an unusual, uncount people who can be disagreeable with sunny people. What struck me particularly was the ease with which he got through his work. If bad manners are infectious, so also are good manners. If we encounter incivility, most of us are apt to become incivil. But it is an unusual, uncouth person who can be disagreeable with sunny people.
Gardner then goes on to show us the benefits of such behavior. The polite conductor never had any difficulties in doing his work. Just like rudeness attracts rudeness, likewise sunny dispositions attract politeness and pleasantness in others.
It is
The
with
poet
manners
Keats has
as with the
claimed
weather.
that he has
Nothing
always
clears
felt
up the
cheerful
spirit
when the
like a
weather
fine
was
day,
sunny.
said Keats.
And says Gardner,
And the
cheerful
cheerful
people
person
come
descends
to
on
us
even
like the
gloomiest
blessings of sunny
us
weather.
with something
Consequently,
of
the atmosphere
benediction
inside a
of a
particular
fine day.
conductor's bus was always pleasant. His politeness, his readiness to accommodate, his pleasant manner of conducting himself results in making his passengers happy, which in turn makes his work easy. That is why Gardner points out that his politeness was not a waste but a very great investment.
And so it was always fine whether on the polite conductor's bus and his own civilities. His conciliatory addresses and good-humoured bearing infected his passengers. In lightening their spirits, he lightened his own task. His gaieties was not a wasteful luxury but a sound investment. I have missed him from my bus route of late, but I hope that only means that he has carried his sunshine on another route. It cannot be widely diffused in a rather drab world, and I make no apologies for writing a panegyric on an unknown bus conductor. If Wordsworth could gather lessons of wisdom from the poor leech gatherer on the lonely moor, I see no reason why lesser people should not take lessons in conduct from one who shows how a very modest calling may be dignified by good temper and kindly feelings. Here, although the writer is sad that the polite conductor is no more on his route, the author hopes that it means that he has carried his cheerfulness to another route. The world at large is rather a dull place, he says, and so much cheerfulness needs to be spread as widely as possible. Moreover, Gardner is not apologetic about writing a piece in praise of an unknown conductor. He feels that just as William Wordsworth, the English romantic poet, could learn lessons from the humble leech gatherer and the lonely moor, ordinary people too could learn from a man who elevated his modest job to good temper and kindness. It is a matter of general agreement that the war has had a chilling effect upon those little everyday civilities of behavior that sweeten the general air. We must get those civilities back if we are to make life kindly and tolerable for each other. We cannot get them back by invoking the law. The policeman is a necessary symbol, and the law is a necessary institution for a society that is still somewhat lower than the angels. But the law only can protect us against the material attack. Nor will the liftsman's way of meeting moral affront by physical violence helps us to restore the civilities. I suggest to him that he would have had a more subtle and effective revenge if he had treated the gentleman who would not say please with elaborate politeness. Here, Gardner says that generally feelings that the World War II has taken away from man's life the use of civilities that have made life sweeter earlier. Gardner asserts that those civilities must be restored to make life with one another easier. This cannot be done with the help of policemen or the law, which are necessary for creatures like man who are far from perfect, whereas the law can only protect us from the physical injury. The liftman's way of retaliating against rudeness with physical violence too is ineffectual. Gardner further suggests that if rudeness were to be replied with excessive politeness, sweet revenge would retain one's moral superiority. He would have had the victory not only over the boar but over himself, and that is the victory that counts. The polite man may lose the material advantage, but he always has the spiritual victory. I condemn to the liftman a story of Chesterfield. In this time, the London streets were without the pavements of today, and the man who took the wall had the driest footing. I never give the wall to a scoundrel, said a man who met Chesterfield one day in the street. I always do, said Chesterfield, stepping with a bow into the road. I hope the liftman will agree that his revenge was much more sweet than if he had flung the fellow into the mud. Here, at the end, Gardner recalls that it is victory over oneself, the only victory that matters to end the peace. He recounts the story of a witty Lord Chesterfield for the edification of the liftmen. There was a time when the streets of the city were very muddy, and the only way to keep one's shoes clean was by walking as close as possible to the wall, where a very narrow strip of ground was a little higher than the rest of the road. Here, Chesterfield came face to face with an uncouth fellow who refused to step into the mud to allow Chesterfield to pass. I never give way to scoundrels, is what he said. Immediately, Chesterfield stepped into the mud with a bow, saying, I always do. Gardner hopes that the liftman will understand that this sweet revenge was better than throwing the fellow into the mud. Here is when Gardner stops and ends his essay on saying please. Thank you very much, friends, for watching the video. I hope you liked it. I really apologize for not putting in some animation to this because it was a very lengthy chapter. Hopefully, we'll add some animation in my next chapter. Stay tuned on some more educational videos on Expressophilia. Friends, I've even launched a second channel, Expressophilia Unplugged. Stay tuned and thank you.